Well, welcome to the Noble Shire for Progressive discussion here at Progressive Rock Central. Thank you, Brian Coombs, keyboardist and vocalist from the Rocking Horse Music Club, for taking time out of your busy schedule. And they are very busy. They're working on some other stuff right now to discuss your latest album, The Last Pink Glow, an interpretation of Jack Kerouac's The Haunted Life, with us. So thank you very much for coming here to talk about that.
Well,
Um, the,
thanks for having me.
yeah, sorry about that. And they released this back on May 9th, so it's been out there. And please pick this up. It's going to be one of my favorite albums of the year. It rocks, and I'm about to tell you a few more things to make you want to go out and get it. But these guys are from New Hampshire, up in New England in the United States, which is uh, beautiful. It's a beautiful time of year. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But they also have some fantastic guest artists, which they usually do on all of their albums. And the thing that got me so excited about this was having Tony Banks. I'm obviously a Genesis fan. I got all the posters and things in back of me, and he's definitely one of my favorite keyboardists of all time. And he plays on this album, but also Kate St. John. I was a big Dream Academy fan when their album came out. She's on here, and we're going to have him talk about what they do and how they got a hold of these people. She's been on a couple of their other albums, but Dusty Gray, Evelyn Cormier, Carolyn Carter, hopefully I'm saying these names right, and Michelle Coombs, which is that your wife?
My wife.
I thought so. And then Katie Dobbins. So go ahead and if you want to just say hi, and uh, otherwise we can just jump right into what attracted you to Jack Kerouac's unfinished novella, The Haunted Life, because I've had to go read it because I love it. This music really inspired me to do that.
Well, great. Yeah. So, Mark, thanks for having me. As you mentioned, Rocking Horse Music Club, we're really busy. I'm actually talking to you from the house on the property. The studio, Rocking Horse Studio, is right over there, and almost the entire band is over there as a backing band to a studio client. So that I was the one who was voted to come over here and talk to you because the one who has some of the crazy ideas over the years. And, the Kerouac thing was yet another one of those crazy ideas. If you want to, should we just jump in and tell you the origins of that?
Sure, please. Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead with
So
that. And then
uh, our,
go
our
ahead.
previous record was called Circus of Wire Dolls, and that was a large format 22 song rock opera that was inspired by a minor character in a Thomas Wolfe novel. And while all of that was going on, I was mixing a record for an artist named Jim Sampas, who happens to be the literary executor of the Kerouac estate.
Oh, wow.
And he listened to Circus of Wire Dolls, and he understood the influence of Thomas Wolfe. And he mentioned to me, he says, well, did you know that Jack was a big Thomas Wolfe fan? And of course, my undergraduate degree is in English with a focus on 20th century American novelists. And I went to school in Lowell, Massachusetts, which was Jack's hometown.
Yeah.
So I was well aware of Jack Kerouac and well aware that he was a Thomas Wolfe fan. So Jim Sampas had said to me, he says, well, do you think we could do something similar with one of Jack's works? And I said to him, I would love to do that if we could do it on one of the earlier works that were more influenced by Thomas Wolfe. And that's my cat playing with the toy over there.
That's
Uh,
yeah.
and he says, "Oh well, what you should let me show you the Haunted Life." This is because that was very much influenced by Thomas Wolfe. So he got me a copy of The Haunted Life, and I saw the lyricism, the poetry that was very much inspired by Thomas Wolfe, which is what I liked about Thomas Wolfe. Excuse me one sec.
Yeah.
Sorry, she's my favorite kitty, that she's playing with this ball right now. And so, Justin Cohn, who's the lead singer of Rocking Horse, he and I read the book, and we started prospecting through the book to find, interesting passages of Jack's that we could use as song lyrics, because that was kind of the idea. We weren't going to just do something inspired by Jack, because we were working directly with the estate. We had their permission to actually use Jack's words as lyrics. But what we ran into was, because this was prose, this wasn't poetry, we would find one really nice line, but then the connecting line didn't work as a lyric. So we found ourselves, there's a line of Jack's, there's a line of mine, there's a line of Justin's, there's a line of Jack's, and we developed a really nice flow of how that was going to be. But so we knew that once we had the lyrics, we would be able to write the melodies and the music to it. And that slowly, before we knew it, we had 4 or 5 songs, and the album was well underway.
All right. Go back just for a second, because I kind of jumped right into this, and we're going to talk about this the rest of the day. But tell us a little bit about Rocking Horse Music Club. How did you begin, emerge, and evolve? And what are some of your influences, some of your favorite bands?
Yeah, okay. Rocking Horse Music Club kind of developed organically out of Rocking Horse Studio. We work with a lot of singer-songwriters who come in and they want to do full band records, but they don't have a full band. So we kind of became that band, and
Wow.
our pool of session musicians kind of grew early on, right? So Myron Kibbe, who's the guitar player for Rocking Horse Music Club, he came in on a project for somebody else. And I thought, Myron is really special. Let's add him to the team. Eric Wagley, the drummer, came in shortly thereafter. And then we started working on two projects. There was a band called Pat and the Hats, which featured Pat Gochez as the songwriter and the singer. And then Justin Cohn came in to record his material. And it was at that point that I thought, I really admire those guys as songwriters. And for the first 10 years of operating the studio, I was so busy getting the business up going and then recording other people, I hadn't really had an opportunity to write or record any of my own music. And that's kind of what musicians do. They build a studio so that they can write their own music. Now, I learned an awful lot, and I was inspired by just about everybody who walked into the studio. I thought I was a knowledgeable music fan before I opened the studio, and it turns out I didn't really know a whole heck of a lot, and it just broadened my horizons as far as
learn more.
Yeah, other things that maybe I was biased against certain genres and certain countries, and it just opened my eyes to a lot of, wow, I really respect Dusty Gray. You had mentioned Dusty in the intro. He's a kind of a country Southern rock singer-songwriter, and I really admired him. So I started talking to him about his influences, and those weren't my influences. But I thought, well, if Dusty is good and Dusty likes these people, I should go check that out. So, I ended up writing songs with Pat, and I wrote songs with Justin. And then later on, we wrote a couple of songs with Dusty. And then we had the band to record them, but we didn't know what we were going to do with them because we weren't a band that was out touring. And, what were we going to do with them? But, we had some success with our very first single, which was a gospel-inspired song called Everywhere is Home. A radio promo guy, a friend of mine in London, managed to get that spinning on BBC. And we thought, well, if we're going to be on the radio, we should have a name. So we went through lots of different names and couldn't really come up with anything. We thought about Rocking Horse People, seeing as we're all from Rocking Horse and we're all Beatles fans. But it turns out there was a Beatles tribute band called Rocking Horse People, so we ended up with Rocking Horse Music Club. So, and then as far as musical influences, for me, it's kind of a combination of what I like to call intelligent pop, the likes of Squeeze and Crowded House. Neil Finn, I think, is one of the finest songwriters on the planet. Yeah. And Squeeze with Chris Difford and Glenn Tilbrook, and we've had the pleasure of working with Chris on a few things. And then there's the progressive rock side of it. But even on the progressive rock side, I tend to have some opinions that maybe don't go with the main flow, like other people might not agree with my decision. So, Genesis was a big band for me growing up. And yes, and Rush, of course, being here in the Northeast, Rush was always playing in town. So it's the band that I saw perhaps more than anybody ever live. So yeah, even on the melodic, it always had to be melodic. There had to be harmony. So that's where the Beatles and the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson is one of a huge influence on me. Yeah. But it always had to be melodic and emotional, and that's what I liked about Genesis. As opposed to, I could appreciate the virtuosity of somebody like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but a lot of that virtuosity left me cold. Whereas Genesis and Yes, certainly Yes had the virtuosity, and Genesis was no slouch there either. But they still managed to write pretty melodies. So that's where I would be as far as influences.
Great stories too. Yeah, excellent. All right, so that probably is the reason you chose Tony over, let's say, Rick Wakeman or some of the other people. What was it that inspired you to ask for Tony? And then, you already answered that for me, but go ahead and explain how that process, how you reached out to him and brought him in. And was he a fan of Kerouac's or just wanted to play the music?
Yeah. So first, let me just say, here's one of my controversial opinions. Okay. I think Rick Wakeman's finest contributions to music happened with him as a session player. Yeah. In particular, Hunky Dory, David Bowie's Hunky Dory record. I love everything that Rick Wakeman played. So, I like Rick Wakeman, but another controversial thing, I thought Yes was better with Tony Kaye as a keyboard player. Not because I think Tony Kaye is a better keyboard player than Rick Wakeman, but I just felt like, especially after
that came out.
Yeah, he managed to lock it down, right? Because you had a lead bass player in Chris Squire, and you had Steve Howe, and you had Bill Bruford, and everybody around him was doing crazy stuff. And I just felt like Tony Kaye was kind of the glue in that band. I thought he was kind of an unsung hero. But as far as Tony Banks goes, I was having a conversation with Jim Sampas, from the estate. And he knew that on Circus of Wire Dolls, we had a huge array of special guests. But as a reaction to having all those special guests, we decided as a band that we wanted to establish the band as a band. And we weren't going to have any special guests on this new record. And in the conversation with Jim, he said, you're friends with a couple of the Genesis guys, and friends might be a stretch. I mean, I would consider Ant Phillips a friend now. And we had done a little bit of work with Steve, but not friends with Steve. But he specifically Jim Sampas asked, he says, well, what about Tony Banks? And I thought, well, Tony doesn't really do those type of things. So I said, I think the chances are slim, Jim, that we would get Tony on the record, but let's find out. So I emailed Richard MacPhail, who of course was Genesis's, went to school with Tony and Peter and Mike and was the road manager. And Rich and I had become friends over the years because he was our narrator when we went to Trading Boundaries in England to do Circus of Wire Dolls. It being a rock opera, we wanted to present it as a story, but none of us are actors and we're not dancers and we weren't going to choreograph this thing. So we had Rich sing, recite. He was a narrator and he did the script that I had written. So we became friendly from that. So I sent Rich an email and just said, I'm doing this thing. It's an interesting project with Jack Kerouac. Do you think Tony would be interested? Just like that, and I think I included a little synopsis of who Jim Sampas was and what the estate was all about. And much to my surprise, a couple of days later, there was an email from Rich with Tony CC'd on it and said, hey, Brian, Tony's on this email. He's interested in learning more. So we went back and forth, and I sent him a couple of the best lines and kind of things that Justin and I had put together and said, here's one example. And then I flew out to England, and Rich and I went down to Tony's place, and Tony said, well, I've got something to play you. What do you think about this? And we batted a few ideas around it, and frankly, again, Tony was a big influence on me. Probably along with Pink Floyd and yes, Genesis. Genesis was it for me, and Tony was always Tony and Ant were my two favorite components of Genesis. So it was definitely, there were a couple of pinch myself moments as I was in Tony's kitchen, drinking tea in Tony's kitchen and then going over to his home studio. It was pretty remarkable. And then, I went back a few months later with Tony and we finished off that song and, talked about future plans. And he said yes to me about everything except being in the music video. I couldn't convince him to be in the music video. And I told, because he was notorious for not wanting to be in the Genesis video.
Even Genesis, yeah.
He always says that his favorite Genesis video is Land of Confusion because he didn't have to be in it, So if he didn't want to be in Genesis videos, I was going to have a hard time getting him to be in a Rocking Horse one. But he's been so gracious with his time. He's been so friendly. And so he's just been part of the team. It's just been fantastic.
That is wonderful. It's kind of like this whole Rush thing. They wanted to get the heck off the stage, no more touring and all that stuff. But as an artist, you still want to do something. And when you're presented with something like this, which is big and very interesting, and you're talking about Jack Kerouac, you're talking about history, how can you not get involved? And so I'm so happy that he did. But I know he's very, very selective about what he does. And for you guys to get him involved, that was just, thank you. Thank you for that. But thank him as well, because he does a fantastic job. And it very important that he was here. So, yeah. Talk about this connection with Kate St. John, because oh my gosh, the Dream Academy, Life in a Northern Town. I'm telling you, when I heard that song for the first time, I was like, oh my God, they're making music like they used to again. And it was like, it just blew, I think everyone, but I mean, especially us, the people that have been listening to, Genesis, all these other bands in the past. I mean, hearing that for the first time, I was like, oh my God, thank you. And I'd love to thank her live, but no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So no, when you think about when that first Dream Academy record came out, it was in the height of Wham and Culture Club and Duran Duran, and I have nothing against any of those acts.
No.
But how anachronistic were the Dream Academy, where it was three people? It was a piano player, an acoustic guitarist, and an oboe player. It it was unique.
Yeah.
And certainly Life in a Northern Town is a phenomenal song. That whole first record is fantastic,
Yeah.
right? And I remember seeing the video and seeing Kate, playing the oboe, and she was wearing like some band uniform, and I just fell in love with the whole image because, like you
Yeah.
said, for people that were listening to the music that we were listening to, it was the next generation of that,
Yeah.
So, uh, you know,
Exactly.
so fast forward, 20 something years, and I'm producing a record for a singer songwriter. And I said to her, I said, what would be really pretty on one of these songs is an oboe. And I thought, well, who do I know that plays oboe? And nobody that I knew here in New England. I'm sure there are plenty of fine oboists in New England, but I immediately thought of Kate. So I went to her website and just sent her an email. And, she was interested. I sent the song to her and she says, "Oh, yeah, Brian, this is really pretty. I think I could do something." So, and that was 10 years ago. And I actually just saw Kate. I was with Kate last weekend.
Oh,
Yeah, I was in England recording strings and a choir for an artist from here. And Kate played the cor anglais on one of the songs.
oh,
And
wow.
Kate has become my string contractor. Whenever I need string players, she's the one who gathers them all up, and she comes to the session, and she and I kind of conduct together with the strings. So she has become a valuable member of my team and a valuable friend. I've been to her place. Her husband Neil McCall is a phenomenal guitar player, songwriter, producer in his own right. So they're kind of a power couple. But Kate has got a wonderful spirit, and I love being able to go to England and work with her.
All right. Um, let one last thing. Let's just talk real quick about New England. I already mentioned to him that I love autumn. That's definitely my favorite time of year. But as a kid, I grew up in Ohio, and we used to go through Pennsylvania and New York and the Allegheny Mountains, and absolutely you see every color imaginable there. But New England takes it up another notch. And how is it right there in New Hampshire right now? I bet you it's beautiful.
Well, it's actually a little past peak now for
Oh,
us.
probably, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I think it came on. It had an earlier onset. I don't know if it's because it's been dry here in New England. So it seemed like it came on early. But yes, it's a beautiful time of year. It's interesting that Thomas Wolfe and Jack Kerouac both wrote very poetically about autumn, October in particular. And it's also my wedding anniversary
oh,
month. It happens in October, and my wife and I picked that at peak foliage season just for the beauty of it. So we're really fortunate to live here in New England. I'm looking out the window now and I'm seeing all the maples across the street are all an orangey yellow right now. So it's definitely my favorite time of year.
the Catskills, right? That is that where you spent your honeymoon? That my parents, my mother was from Syracuse and spent with my father in the Catskill Mountains. They say it's one of the most beautiful places to be. Just is it north? I can't remember if it's north or south of Niagara Falls. It's up near there.
Yeah, it's up near there. That is not my parents spent their honeymoon there as
Yeah.
well, but my honeymoon was actually I was in a band back in the day called Tristan Park. It was a kind of a melodic poppy prog band, and our honeymoon was a Tristan Park tour of Europe.
Oh wow.
So that's the kind of special girl that I married who
Yeah.
allowed me to bring my band with me on our honeymoon and allowed me to leave my job in the software industry to dedicate myself full time to what I'm doing now. So I'm married to a very special woman.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. And that makes life so much better. where where's probably your favorite place in New Hampshire to go? And then we'll move on to the come back to the album.
Favorite spot. Michelle and I love to go up to the White Mountains
Okay.
and ride across on something called the Kangamangas Highway. And we just like to do that whenever we get a free moment. We drive up, we drive the Kank, and then we go to our favorite pizza place in North Conway. And North Conway is a kind of a touristy area, but we tend to go hiking on trails out. That's something that we like to do a lot too. So we hike in the White Mountains.
So if you're in that area, the White Mountains, that's the place to go. I can't remember, but is that where um is it Constitution Mountain or something like that? It's one of
Mount Washington.
or Mount Washington. That's
Yeah,
what
Mount Washington is the highest peak in the Northeast. So that's beyond our hiking ability. We have taken the vintage cog railway up to the top of Mount Washington, but I don't think my arthritic knees could handle the trip down from Mount Washington.
and it's funny, same thing with me. It's not the climbing. Climbing is easy when you're
Yeah,
going up, but it's coming back down. Yeah, trying
coming
to slow
down is
yourself. No,
yeah, it's
yeah,
painful.
good point. Good point. Now, first of all, we probably should have talked about it when we were talking about Tony, but go ahead and talk about the live show that he's going to do with you. And then that the next question was going to be, are you going to tour more further, or will there be more locations? Or go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So we will be returning to England for two shows. I think that it's the 13th and 14th of November to a place called Trading Boundaries in East Sussex. They're kind of become our home away from home. We've played there regularly since 2018. And on the Friday night, something very special is happening. Tony Banks will be joining us not to play because I had already asked him, months ago, hey, Tony, how about joining us on stage to play the song that he wrote with us? And he thought, no, I'd be too nervous, which isn't it funny? I mean, the number of people that he's played to in his life, and he's nervous to play in a small dinner theater. But I guess I get it. I mean,
Yeah,
if you're used to playing for 20, 30,000 people, if you're playing for 200 people and they're right on top of you,
yeah,
and he's not going to have his crew there, and it's not Genesis. So, but
and it's probably been a while since he's
yeah,
performed
yeah,
live. I
yeah.
mean,
So,
I'm sure he still sits down at the piano probably every single day. How could you not? But he's not used to, playing, a full show maybe or
yeah, and we would have to rehearse with him. I think he was, he'd be concerned about that. And, really, there's nothing really in it for him. He doesn't have anything
yeah,
to prove, right?
no.
And
He's
um,
proven it all.
so if he's going to be uncomfortable, or if he's worried that he's going to flub, which we as fans would be fine with
Who
that. We would just
cares?
love to
Yeah, we
see
probably
him.
wouldn't even realize it. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I know he and I think are having worked with him. I think we're kind of similar in that I just don't think there's really any benefit for him,
Yeah.
legacy wise, to come play with us. But he did express interest in being involved, and that led us to having him do a Q&A session. He's going to sit down with Chris Welch, the famous writer from Melody
Yeah.
Maker, who was a big Genesis supporter back in the day. So Chris is going to sit down and they're going to have a conversation, and then Tony is going to take questions from the audience, and then he'll probably stay for a few of our songs. I've told him that he's under no obligation to stay for our set, because again, like me, I don't really, frankly, like to go out to live music anymore either. So, but yeah, so that's happening. That'll be the Friday, the 14th, if anybody's interested. It's almost close to sold out. So if you're interested in that, and we're also playing the Thursday, we're going to do different sets. on the Thursday and the Friday. So that's kind of enticed people to maybe book both. But then as far as additional shows, there are no plans for additional shows at this point. Um, we're looking forward to doing these shows and having a good time. We're actually going to do the shows, and then we're going to spend a day recording at Abbey Road on the Sunday.
Oh, wow.
And because I've done quite a few sessions at Abbey Road over the past couple of years, but I've never done it with the guys in the band. So I'm looking forward to just spending a day, because I've got my London team, and my London team doesn't directly involve my team here. So, I just love the idea of spending a day,
bringing everyone together,
bringing my crew over there and working with the London crew there, and just enjoying the time. And then the holidays will happen, and then, we can reassess in the new year. I know we've got plans for a new record, and if we got an offer, if Cruise to the Edge wanted to have us, which seems doubtful, but if they wanted to have us, love to do that. Prague Stock isn't too far away from us in New Jersey, so if they wanted to have us, we would consider that. But there are no other plans. We did a few shows here over the past month, and then we go to England, and then everybody will take a break.
All right. Well, let's get into this album. It really is fantastic. Starts out with Haunted, multi-dimensional song. And I think it's Justin is the lead vocal on this, if I get this right. Reminded me so much of Randy Meisner of the Eagles.
Oh, there you go. I like to hear that. I thought you were going to say David Gates.
Well, I mentioned him as well.
Yeah, and Christopher Cross is the other one that we get a lot.
Yeah. Is there? Well, what do you think? Go ahead and talk about that, and then go ahead and talk about the song. Does he not like being compared to David Gates, or?
No, he loves it. It's flattering. I think it's flattering.
Yeah.
And he thinks it's flattering. And frankly, they're more in the genre of music that's home for Justin. Justin didn't grow up in a progressive rock background. He grew up more of a singer-songwriter, folk type of thing. So yeah, those if you added in, Leonard Cohen,
yeah,
those would be kind of Justin's influences. So, and then the song Haunted was actually, it's kind of ironic. That was a song that Justin and I wrote prior to even having a discussion with Jim Sampis about the Haunted life. Justin and I had kind of set aside, we were going to write an album called Escape from Our Town that was going to have characters that were either stuck in a small town, or escaped from a small town and were successful, or escaped and were failures, or escaped and were successful and then came back home. So Haunted was one of those songs. And we didn't know, once we started with the Kerouac theme, if it was going to have a home there. And Jim Sampis was like, "Oh, I hope you're going to put Haunted on the record because it sounds so good." So it's in keeping, because, a lot of Jack Kerouac stuff is obviously about exploring and being on the road and getting away from home. Yeah. And Thomas Wolfe was all about that, getting away from home and then coming home only to discover that home is someplace different now. Yeah. So it was in keeping with the theme, but it didn't have any Jack Kerouac words on that.
All right. It's a small thing, or it's the small things, and it really is in life. We sometimes just glance over those things and look how important they were to our lives.
Yeah, that one, I love that one because it sounds nothing like anything we'd done before. And that the music bed was composed by Josh Kimball, who's my engineer here at the studio. And, I put out a request to all the guys, because most of it starts with me musically, but then it can get samey, because I write the way I write. So that's why, we try to get Myron involved and Mike involved. And, on this one, Andrew, the new guitar player, was very much involved. And he was involved. So so Josh gave us this music bed, and Andrew and I kind of plucked around and came up with a melody on the verse, and then I came up with the chorus, and then Justin and I wrote some lyrics. And there's also an interesting thing about the lyric on that. The main character in The Haunted Life, he has two friends, and one of them is kind of a dreamer who just wants to drift, and wherever the wind takes him is where he will go.
Oh,
And his other friend also wants to explore, but he has a very clear path from point A to point B. So that song is a juxtaposition between those two approaches to life.
and then I wrote down here Wes Thurber, his trumpet towards the end. The song kind of has a jazzy feel to it, but he just really brings it home at the end, towards the end.
Yeah, that was, again, that was the idea, to try to give some touches to the Beat Generation and, Jack Kerouac's love of jazz.
Yeah.
Wes Thurber is a phenomenal singer-songwriter. He's a multi-dimensional guy. He actually, the guy who did the album cover for Circus of Wire Dolls for us, and he's a singer-songwriter who was recorded with us. So yeah, I kind of pulled him down here to do that trumpet, muted trumpet. I love the sound of that, and it definitely gave it a jazzier feel.
All right. Then we do the song that Tony played, The Haunted Life. And how much did he write this song, or how much, obviously his keyboard playing, piano, and all that he did, but how much did he help write it, or?
Yeah, so musically it's his, and melodically it's his. He gave us a piano track, and the melody was kind of cooked into the piano track. Justin and I altered it in place. We actually went back, Justin and I, and we sat down and we listened to solo Genesis songs that were solely written by Tony to get an idea of, oh, okay, here, listen, Phil is doing unison with the piano here, and he's doing a harmony to the piano there, and he's doing a counterpoint to the piano there. So that was kind of the approach that Justin and I took as we were trying to fit the Kerouac words, and this was the most difficult one, because we knew that we were going to be able to take Jack's words and put them to melodies that we wrote. But in this case, we were trying to marry Jack's words with Tony's music. And that was more difficult than we thought. Justin was way more dedicated to the concept than I was. I ended up saying, hey, look, here's one Jack line. I'm going to write the rest. And Justin looked for every opportunity to slip another Kerouac line in, right? Yeah. And Justin was successful with that. Like I said, he was way more dedicated to the concept than I was. I didn't have the patience. So I think, the chorus, I think, has a lot of Jack in it. The verses are more, more Justin and I. And, my favorite part, other than, putting it together and working with Tony, I love the background vocal arrangement. I love having done that. And that's where you had mentioned Evelyn and Katie and Caroline. We've done records for all three of them. They're three remarkable women, fantastic singer-songwriters, in their own right. Now, Evelyn and Caroline, they've been on the past couple Rocking Horse Music Club records. Katie was new to it. So I got the 4 of them in. So it's Evelyn and Katie and Caroline. I guess it's just the 3 of them. And then Andrew Returno, our newest guitar player, Andrew and I doing the male parts. And that was very much inspired. That was a Brian Wilson inspiration.
Yeah.
But Tony's chord progression made it, there were interesting chord choices, a lot of 7 chords. So I had fun orchestrating that vocal stack to include those, 7s, and that really made it feel like a Brian Wilson thing, because Tony is a big Brian Wilson fan.
And I was just going to ask, is he also a Kerouac fan? I don't know if I asked you that, or.
He's not really. I mean, he was aware of it, And I think he had read On the Road, kind of like everybody has. It's
Sure.
certainly from his generation. I think Richard McPhail was a bigger Kerouac fan. And I think it was Rich's energy, frankly, that kind of, convinced Tony, yeah, okay, I'll give this a go. If Rich, Rich thinks this is a viable project, and Rich thinks this Kerouac guy is, but like I say, Tony was aware of who Jack Kerouac was and knew,
How
knew
could
the
you not?
legacy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even I came after that, but even I read Kerouac when I was a kid. Yeah. Um, if we're silent and we listen, talk about that one.
That was lyrically and thematically one of my favorite moments from the book. Is again the three young boys just back from their first year at university. um, it's summer of 1941. They're home. They want to continue doing what they've done every summer. They sit by the Merrimack River, throw stones into the river, drink Coca-Cola, sit on the banks, talk about girls, smoke cigarettes. But they're intelligent and they know what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And there's a really chilling line in that, that they're sitting on the riverbed, and one of them says, if we're silent and we listen, I bet we can hear the guns
Yeah. From,
in Russia,
yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
they talk about all the guys their own age who are being slaughtered
Yep.
in Russia. The German invasion of Russia the Soviet Union had just happened,
Yep.
and there they are still living their childhood life by the banks of the Merrimack River. And the Merrimack River is also important for me. I grew up on the banks of the Merrimack River in southern New Hampshire. It flows through New Hampshire down into Massachusetts. So, I spent my childhood along the banks of the Merrimack River. So there were a lot of, for me with Jack, there was a kinship as far as a familiar sameness as far as our upbringing, and we were both Thomas Wolfe fans, so I felt a kinship with him. But and then musically, it's probably the hardest, rockiest song on the record. And then that was, I asked Andrew to really chug some, heavy guitar, and it was heavier than we'd ever used before. And then the end, there's a big symphonic thing with, a double string quartet, and those are alternating measures of 4 and 3, which was a trick that we used on a Tristan Park song back in 1998. We did the 4-3-4-3 that I just felt, was really, 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 really effective. And I'm really proud of that string arrangement. That was my string arrangement.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of the things that ELO did and also Kansas. I mean,
Yeah,
it was absolutely stunning when I heard that. Yeah.
thank you.
And when you were talking about sitting on the banks of the Merrimack, it reminded me of Tom Sawyer and
Sure.
that whole era. I mean, definitely not the same, but the kids just enjoying life and living on the Mississippi River and not really worried about what was going on around them, which there were revolutionary things going
Yeah.
on at that time. And with everything that's going on in our world, this is perfect as a way to remind people that these things can lead to war, and no one wants that. And um, yeah, just you really did a good job and you did that within the lyrics where they're talking about hearing the guns. That really was perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Thanks.
mean, people need to know that this stuff is serious. There's, a lot of people laughing at what's going on, and there's the inner, you know, social media fun side of this where they're picking on each other, but this is real and it's not something to play with.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned it when you wrote about the album. It was written what, in the run up to the presidential election here in the United States, it was written with the specter of what was going on in Ukraine and immigration issues and all of the things that are in the news now. And yet, those were all topics that Jack was writing about, in 1939, 1940, and it reminds you, wow, we really do have to keep an eye on things or things could get out of control. So it was, as we were reading things, Justin and I were like, wow, this could be 2025.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. The Ballad of Joe Martin is a nice jazzy opening. Talk about that one.
Yeah, well, so Joe Martin is the kind of Americana, the folky Americana one. And that we wrote that with Dusty Gray. And that was that's the first scene in Kerouac's book. It comes out firing with Joe Martin, who's basically Jack Kerouac's dad. And this is a racist, misogynistic, xenophobic bigot. And it was one of the first songs that we tackled when we still thought it was potentially going to be a rock opera. And Justin and Dusty and I looked at each other and was like, well, how are we going to, in first person, sing these terrible things that Joe Martin is spewing, right? There's no way we could talk about that.
Yeah.
And, that's where I think it was Dusty who said, well, what if we have it sung from the perspective of the son, and the son, who again is the Jack Kerouac character, is more worldly and he's not xenophobic. He's not racist. And, Jack Kerouac got that reference in about Benny Goodman. And we thought, oh, well, that's important. This is an interracial jazz band, and, it came on the radio, and to drown out his father, Peter Martin cranks the radio. Yeah. And, Dusty was a, big part of getting the nuance. We had to say, well, what is the cause? What's the root cause of this guy being such a jerk? And we came to the point that he was just afraid of change, whether they were immigrants coming in and opening new shops, and he was just afraid for his livelihood. And it doesn't excuse what he's saying, but we tried to find what was the reason. What are the reasons? There are plenty of people in our country and elsewhere who think like Joe Martin did back in 1941, and you can't demonize them, and you just have to try to understand them. I don't really know what the answer is, but that was our case study.
Yeah.
And just as applicable now as it was in 1941.
Definitely. All right, Changing Channels, another great one.
Yeah, so Changing Channels, thank you. That was another one that was set for the album concept of Escape from Our Town. Again, it's about a guy sitting in his apartment, literally changing channels. So it's, again, does it fit with 1941? Not really, but it's the escapism of Kerouac is the reason it was tied together. So yeah, this is another one that has no Jack Kerouac words in it. And it was, again, a lyric that was just about a guy who was stuck in a small town with a dead-end life and a dead-end wife, I think is one of my lyrics on that. And, just that's a case of Andrew and I wrote the verses and Justin wrote the chorus. And it's Tony Banks's favorite song on the record.
I was going to say, yeah, I think I compared you to him, and you sound so much like him, and with all the different synths and things you used, and yeah, I could see how we would enjoy that. And there are a lot of keyboards on that song.
Yeah, there's that big synth build up at the end. The instrumental thing at the end is very Tony Banks inspired. And then earlier, there are all the Tony Banks devices, the CP70 electric piano, and even that drum groove is something that, you might have heard on, the Mama album,
Mama,
right? It's
yeah.
just that relentless drum groove. So that was, yeah, very much inspired by more of the pop side of Tony Banks and Genesis.
All right. Ballad of Wesley Martin. It almost sounds like a country or a Western movie. Yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, so the Ballad of Wes Martin, was me again on the piano trying to be jazzy. There's some really, really crazy chords on that. That for the album recording, um, I gave up and brought my buddy Rick Black, who was in Tristan Park with me, to play that opening piano part because the chords were just so weird. I've since learned it, and we'll be playing that live. But it gave me another excuse to bring my friend Rick in to be involved. And then the other big influence on that, believe it or not, is Tears for Fears, one of my
Oh, yeah.
favorite band. There's a song on the Tipping Point, which was their album
The
from
new
a
one.
few years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
I think is a miraculously beautiful album.
It
There's a
is.
song called "Long Long Time"
Is
that
that the extra one?
no, I think it's on the
It's
album.
on the album.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's on the
Because
album. It
a lot
has
of people never heard those extra songs, but I went out and bought that EP or whatever it was that came out. And I was like, why didn't they include these? These are
agreed. Yeah, no, this is one that's on the basic record, and
okay.
it was 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so it was in seven. It was a measure of three and then a measure of four. And that was they had the piano figure doing the bum bum bum,
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. And because the second half of it is in four, you don't realize that the first half is in three. So, when people want to talk, there have been a lot of reviews about the record of, hey, we like the record, but it's not really prog.
Oh,
But if you really listen enough, right? So basically, the opening of Wes Martin is in 7/4,
yeah.
and I'll even go so far as Joe Martin, which is the kind of country Americana one. Those verses are in 6/4. Now, Dusty and I, when we originally did it, we just went with what felt right, and it was only after the fact when I was getting ready to have Eric record the drums, I was like, oh, that's in 6/4. So there's some sneakiness in there. So, and
Definitely.
then there's a nice clarinet solo on Wes Martin that are, a guy that I went to high school, his son, which again shows our age. His son Simon played a nice clarinet solo, and he'll be joining us for the shows in England and has played the shows that we've done here in New England. So I like that tune.
Definitely. Every song in this album. Splitting Atoms.
Splitting Atoms, a song that was never intended to be on the record. It was done for our first EP back in the day, 2018. But for some reason back then, we were trying to convince people to buy physical product, so we didn't release it to streaming services. So a lot of people never got a chance to hear it. So when we were reaching kind of the end point of the record for Last Pink Glow, I felt like it was missing something more substantial. We had a bunch of good, melodic tunes, but it felt like it needed another tune with weight. And I kind of revisited Splitting Atoms, and again, it had that kind of that theme of people going away and regretting things and being haunted by things. So we changed a few lyrics, and Justin came in and re-sang it, and then no, it's the original drum track, I think. But so yeah, and yeah, we chopped out some stuff. The original version that's on the first EP, um, there's some arrangement parts of it that were overly complicated just to be complicated. So we streamlined it to the way it should have been. So yeah, so that's an older song, and coincidentally, it's our most
Thanks.
streamed song on Spotify.
Well, thanks for sharing it too. Yeah, and not holding back and saying, "Well, put it on another album." No, great. And by the way, there are what 13 tracks, I think. So they absolutely give you your money's worth. There's a lot of great music here.
Thank you.
Restless Wanderers, which is
Yeah,
what the story's all about, right?
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, obviously the title was very much inspired by Jack Kerouac. Musically, it was me one afternoon trying to write something along the lines of Three of a Perfect Pair by King Crimson.
Oh yeah.
That was actually the blueprint of, is it in six? I can't remember now. It might be in 6/4. And sat down at a keyboard and kind of played that riff, intending for it to be a guitar arpeggio. And of course, whenever, like, there were a lot of songs on the last record, where when Pat and I would sit down together and say, "Hey, let's write a song that sounds like ELO," or "Hey, let's write a song that sounds like Roxy Music." And by the time you're done, we're not those people.
Right.
So, certainly Restless Wanderers to me sounds more like, Vermont's jam band Fish than it does sound like
Oh yeah.
80s King Crimson. But then we did bring Simon in to play alto sax on it, and he plays that dun, dun, and that sax riff kind of reminded me of Ian McDonald,
Right.
and his
Yeah.
contributions to King Crimson. So that's what I think of when I hear that. And then it's just, I think it's just Andrew and I, singing some background vocals, and I think I doubled it with me singing through a vocoder. But it was really supposed to be kind of clear the palette, get ready for the big finale. I tried to lengthen it into something more substantial. It just didn't. It felt right as a 2.5 minute thing. So that's where it stayed.
Yep. Big city, small town blues. You have to get some blues in there for sure.
Well, that's one of the ones that has caused trouble for the progressive rock purists. They're
Oh
wondering,
goodness.
what the heck is a blues song doing on it? And I tried to explain to people that we wrote this album as kind of a soundtrack to a novel.
Yeah.
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 So there's a line in the book where the character says, I've got a locomotive on my chest. I have the blues, and that's a fact." So when the muse gives you something like that, you have to run with it,
Well,
right?
yeah.
So I sent a message to Myron Kibbe, our resident bluesologist, and said, "Hey, Myron, can you write us a modern up-tempo rocking blues that Justin and I will then, put some stuff over the top of?" And Myron came back with, an up tempo rock thing, and he even had a vocal melody that he played on a guitar because he's not a singer. So he had a melody as kind of a guide. And Justin and I wrote, again, it's kind of a, hey, if it's somebody that's frustrated. It's the grass is always greener, right? He's frustrated because
Yeah.
he lives in a small town, but he knows that if he goes to the big city, he's going to get swallowed up and he's going to be depressed by both of those. And he also knows eventually he's going to end up in a war that's most likely going to kill him. So it allowed me to be really cynical on the lyrics, right? If the war doesn't get me, the city will. And I had fun writing. I really tried to get in character as an old blues guy to
Yeah.
write that lyric, and then Justin really really killed that vocal. So it was that was a real fun one to do. I'm happy that we did it. And then I got another big influence for me in the breakdown. It goes to the Rhodes piano, and it was me channeling Ray Manzarek from The Doors.
Yes. Yeah. I sense that too. Yeah. He's one of my favorite.
Yeah.
Definitely. I just wanted to say, I also heard a little Joe Walsh with that opening guitar. And for anyone that has any problems with prog, maybe coming from blues or prog being influenced by blues, take a listen to Jethro Tull's first three albums, and if you're hearing prog there, then you're not listening to the same albums that I am. I mean, they were blues before they were prog,
Sure.
and I love those blues. I like the blues anyway, but um, they transitioned, and everyone can. To me, prog is an open book. You should be able to do whatever. Yeah, it's nice to have all these difficult signatures, time signatures, and all these things, but it's about the music. How does it um, make you feel? And Prague has a certain way, and it should be open. It shouldn't be this, it's got to sound like Genesis, or it's got to sound like Yes, or it's not Prague unless it's Pink Floyd. No, no,
Right.
that's
Right.
crazy.
Right.
That's crazy talk. Um, okay, and then the epic closing track is just you bringing everything back together and talk about that one. It is a one heck of a way to finish the album.
Yeah, thanks. So that's the last Pink Glow. That line was one of the first things that I wrote down in my notebook. In that scene where the racist father is ranting and raving in this tiny, tiny kitchen in Lowell, Massachusetts, Jack like totally diverts in the middle of the chaos in the kitchen, and he writes about the last pink glow of dusk shines through the window. And I just thought, wow, in the middle of all that
Yeah,
chaos, for him to point out the beauty that was still in the world. So I wrote that down. And it was one of the words, one of the lines that I sent to Tony, actually. I said, I don't really have anything to go with this right now, but this image is really beautiful. So after everything else was written, I discovered that I had all these beautiful. So the last Pink Glow probably has at least the first half is almost all Jack Kerouac lyrics, and somehow we were able to string them together. It worked. So, somehow it really worked. But it was me sitting down, and again, it was written on. I wrote this on a synth with a 12-string guitar patch, fully intending to have Myron and Andrew play this on acoustic guitars, and it went just kind of flowed, and it was like it was rare for me that I actually had a microphone set up as I was writing it, and I had the words on a music stand, and that never happens for me. My process is a lot slower and methodical, and I've got to sit on something for a long time. But this was kind of the progression was coming out, the melody was coming out, and the lyrics were very singable. So we did the whole first half. It's very pastoral. It was supposed to be again a summer. Summer is here, and we're trying to. It's there's beauty in the world, and then so then we did that whole first half, and then it kind of stops, and then it gets a little bit darker, and that was kind of all right. Now we've moved into autumn/winter, and again, this foreshadowing because it's now early December of 1941.
yeah,
And there's a line in there about, the winter sun. Where will we be when the winter sun blazes cold? Those were so yeah, the second half is all Justin and I lyrically. And, it's basically, foreshadowing the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Harbor. Yeah,
And then there's another line that, again, foreshadows where we are now in 2025. There's a call and response that Justin and I do. Um, and there's a line in there about, is there power in this hate?
mm,
And that, again, I don't like to mix politics with music, but that was kind of one of my like, oh God, is there power in this hate? Are we destined to this fate or whatever the response is?
yeah,
And that was kind of a call to, hey, let's wake up, people, and let's be more human
human.
and kind. Let's be kind.
Yeah, there's enough hate in the world. We don't need to add more to it for sure.
and
Well,
then and then it
yeah,
ends with sorry, yeah, it ends with Mike McAdam and Myron Kibbe and Andrew Rotuno just going nuts on big guitar solos. That's the generation that we were brought up in. So it's all three of them pulling out David Gilmour and any other musical influences on those solos, and I absolutely adore what they did.
Yeah, they did an excellent job. Well, definitely, yeah, please, if for somehow, some way you missed all this or you haven't heard about this yet, Rocking Horse Music Club's The Last Pink Glow, please listen to it. That's all you need. Trust me. Once you hear it, you'll be like, I got to hear the whole thing. I played a little. My wife hadn't heard it yet, and I played just a little bit. Now she wants to hear the whole album. So yeah, that's exactly what happens. It happened to me when I first heard it, and yeah, go and get this. But before we leave, I just want to. You mentioned that you're already working on your next album. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or is it in the preliminary stages, or do you think you'll release it next year or the year after?
I would like to get it in, so it's in the preliminary stages. Mike and I have written a couple of pieces for it, and it I think it's probably going to be more of a Baroque symphonic
Oh, wow.
pop type of thing. A lot less synthesizers, a lot less electric guitar. Probably be like upright piano and acoustic, and maybe vibey jazzy drums and woodwinds and strings. Again, I've been doing a lot of string and woodwind arrangements, and so I talked to Kate about it when I saw Kate last weekend, and she's on board for helping me with clarinets and oboes. So I imagine it'll be clarinets and oboes and bassoons and a string, double string quartet, along with kind of upright piano, kind of instrumentation wise, maybe like Mark Harris from Talk Talk's
Yeah.
solo album, yeah, but maybe a little more melodic because we can't help it. Whenever we try to get too esoteric, we come back to pretty melodies. But something less bombastic is how I vision it.
Any famous collaborators you're thinking of, or do you want to talk about the concept or too early title, any of that?
We haven't. We have two topics, two potential titles and topics. So we haven't picked one of them yet. One of them is about there's an element, a dark moment in my family's history,
Mm.
um, that has kind of haunted me over the years. That would I mentioned it to Tony, and he was like, "Ooh, that's a heavy concept, Brian." So we'll see. It'd be hard to make that have a happy ending, but it's something that I would like to pursue. And then maybe revisiting the escape from our town concept are the two kind of ideas. And then we're also interested in Circus of Wired Dolls, revisiting our previous album as a theatrical music theater type piece.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll also be working on that as well.
All right. Any famous people you want to talk about, or still too early on that?
Yeah, no plans. I mean, we have to be careful about that. I
Yeah.
mean, we've been honored, that we've had so many talented people, but I think on the last record, it obscured the band identity, and people were more interested in talking about the special guests than what the core band was doing. And somebody also asked me, "Oh, well, you're going to have Mike Rutherford or Peter Gabriel on the next record?" And I was like, "Yeah, no. I mean, that wasn't what it has to happen organically, And I also don't want to be seen as the guy who's going around collecting rock stars, because that's not the way it is. So we have to be careful about that. But if something happens organically, I mean, I grew up looking at those liner notes, and Steve Winwood playing on a Clapton record and a Phil Collins record, and Christine McVie being on this record. And I was a liner note guy, so I always wanted to be like, oh, well, cool. Christine McVie has Clapton and Steve Winwood. That's super cool. I want to do that someday. So I'm very fortunate that I've been able to make that happen, but it has to be for the right reasons.
Well, it sounds like you might be a Traffic fan, and I definitely am. Anything Steve does is pretty good, but
Indeed.
that
Yep.
Traffic era was incredible.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, anything you want to add? We covered a lot of ground, and thank you very much for taking all this time because I know you're very busy. So thank you for that. But is there anything we missed or anything you wanted to close in saying?
No, Mark, I'm great. I'd love to see some, if you're listening to this and you're in England, or if you feel like taking a ride. I know there are quite a few Americans who are flying over for that show at Trading Boundaries. That's in November at Trading Boundaries. Love to see you.
Yeah, and that it's a famous place. A lot of my indie bands, people that I know in back of me here, go there and talk about how great it is. So yeah,
Yeah,
no,
it's a magical venue.
yeah. Well, hey, thank you very much again, Brian. This has been wonderful. Uh, Thanks for everything. I'm looking forward to your next album. I'm a fan now for sure, and I'll get you some more details on how to get that to me because yeah, I would definitely love to have it, and I'll definitely display it. But please get out there, everyone, and give this a try. Give it a listen, and that's all you'll need. You'll want to hear more, and you'll probably be like me. You'll want to start reading some Jack Kerouac, which I did as a kid, but that you're forced to. Now you can sit back and just enjoy it, and he's a great writer. Yeah, good topic, subject, everything. You guys really connected with a good one here. Yeah.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you much.
All right. Well, hold on. I'm gonna stop the recording, and you and I can talk for just a minute here. But everyone, please, the Rocking Horse Music Club, take a look at this. It's a great album.